The answer you just gave me classified?
Is what?
The answer you just gave me classified in any way?
I don't think so.
Okay, then I can say the following.
That was then FBI Director Robert Mueller testifying before Congress on the subject of NSA surveillance in 2013. With his report expected to be submitted to the Attorney General in the coming weeks, Mueller could be back before Congress soon. That's if Democrats follow through on threats to subpoena the special counsel and his findings. In an article last month for Wired, Garrett Graff, who has written extensively about Mueller, outlined 7 ways he believes the investigation could end. Graff wrote that a letter from Mueller to the Attorney General stating that his work is complete would be, quote, most Mueller-like, an understated and quiet end to the probe by a man who has always preferred to let his work speak for itself. Earlier, my colleague Rena Ninen spoke with Robert Grant. He's the former special agent in charge of the FBI's Chicago office and once worked with Robert Mueller at the Bureau.
Robert, from your experiences with Robert Mueller, do you agree that this investigation might end with a letter to the Attorney General?
Oh, I think Bob Mueller will give him a full report. It'll be a confidential report, as the statute requires. And he'll probably have to break it into 2 parts. A part that's confidential that probably has classified information and techniques in it. And then maybe he might draft a second report, a possible public report for Attorney General Barr to consider releasing. But at the end of the day, it's going to be up to Attorney General Barr how much is to be released and how much is to be provided to Congress.
You know, Robert, you were quoted in September 2018 in a Vanity Fair article, and you said that Bob Mueller has a very, very good instinct for politics and the dangers of Washington, D.C. That's what made him a very good FBI director. That's what you wrote. I think his greatest strength was his ability to navigate shark-infested waters very well. He's in tune with both Republicans and Democrats. How do you think that might influence how he concludes his work on the special counsel?
I think it'll inform him. It makes him a logical choice for this type of an investigation. I watched Bob Mueller. He took over the FBI, I think, only about a week before 9/11, and then had to suddenly transform the FBI at the president's direction almost overnight on the fly. So his ability to walk the halls of Congress, where people were looking to find people responsible for 9/11 and inside the country, and I think he navigated both aisles very, very well, probably better than any director I've ever worked for. So I think his ability to understand all the landmines that are in Washington, D.C., and all the potential ramifications of anything he may write, he's probably as good as anybody I've seen, and probably the best person to be in this position.
You know, this article is so fascinating. I'm going to quote you again from this. You said, my guess is that he's pressing his lawyers as hard as he can without interfering with the strategy or the tactics of the investigation. So based on your experience, how do you think Mueller handles those pressures? You were talking a little bit about how he knows the landmines, but, you know, how do you expect him to still continue to be so thorough despite all those landmines?
Well, Bob Mueller is all about the mission, and if it means pushing people beyond their limits and creating some stress in the environment, that's okay for him. At the end of the day, he wants to have a thorough and rigorous investigation. So his famous line to the FBI, the only strategic guidance we were given post 9/11 was leave no stone unturned. And he made it very clear when he began asking people questions. You walk into the door expecting 3 questions and you end up with 100. So he's a prosecutor in that regard, and that is he really wants to fundamentally understand and have confidence that if he has to speak on this topic, which he won't do voluntarily, but he'll do if required to, he wants to have firm footing on all potential avenues of the investigation. So I think you will find him to be a vigorous, demanding person. He didn't sleep much more than 3 hours a night as it was, and outlasted people half his age. So I think he's the right person, the right time in this point in history for this kind of investigation.
That says something remarkable about his age and his stamina. You know, lawmakers have already said that they've not ruled out issuing a subpoena for Mueller to appear before Congress. You know how political those congressional hearings can be. How do you expect him to handle that if he's subpoenaed?
Well, I think he's going to take guidance from the Attorney General because, in essence, he is attached to the Department of Justice in this regard, and this is a good time for Bill Barr to be at the helm. Bill Barr is a very, very well-respected lawyer. Was a great Attorney General under George H.W. Bush, and I think having somebody with his caliber at the helm of DOJ now is really important. And I think Bob Mueller will listen carefully to what the law requires. I think he understands public testimony, understands non-public testimony and the dangers inherent in both. So I think he'll be, if required, he will go and answer whatever questions need to be asked. And I think he'll be straight up about everything. And if he doesn't know the answer to a question, he'll just tell him, I don't know the answer to that question, and I'll have to get back to you.
So finally, late last week, the sentencing of former Trump deputy campaign manager Rick Gates was delayed. And if you look at the court filings, Gates is still cooperating with several ongoing investigations. What does that tell you about where Bob Mueller is going with this investigation?
Well, I think I don't know anything more than what I read, just like you do, and I think he probably has figured out certain avenues of inquiry that still need to be finished before he finalizes his investigation. Some avenues might be finished already, and there's nothing more needed to be gained by cooperating of individuals or additional charges. So he's probably splicing those charges that need to be remanded to the Eastern District of Virginia or the D.C. District or Southern District of New York, and then deciding which ones fit his mission. He's got really a bifold mission. One, did the Russians influence the election? Well, I don't think anybody needs Mueller's report to understand that the attempt was absolutely there. But the bigger question, and I think the question the country is going to have to ask, is it wants the answers to, is did in fact anybody in his campaign collude with the Russians? And then you get into whole kinds of issues of what is collusion in federal law and what does that fit? I mean, I've listened to a lot of people talk about the Steele dossier and things like that, but at the end of the day, when you're in law enforcement or in the intelligence business, you take information from all kinds of characters, people who are very reputable to people who are have absolutely no integrity. But you evaluate the information they provided on a piece-by-piece basis, and you use it based on your validation of that information. So I'm real curious as to what Bob Mueller has validated and not validated based on what the public discourse has been.
Boy, we all are. Can't wait to see what happens. Robert Grant, thank you very much for joining us, Robert.
Thank you.
Coming up, Andrew Wheeler gives CBS News his first